News, AP and ABC News have called the race. Prop 50 is a go. The Yes campaign has won. The race has been called. So let's bring in our panelists now. Democratic strategist Andrew Acosta and Republican strategist Rob Stutzman. Let's go to the Dems first. How are you guys feeling? And I mean, it goes without saying.
I'm shocked.
But wow, big surprise, right?
I think it was a fait accompli, and I'm surprised it took them 2 minutes to call it. I think they could have called this 2 hours ago because I think everybody pretty much knew where this was going. So. It'll be a good night for the governor and his team, and then we'll the dust will settle, people will announce, and then everything will change back into politics. As people have said, this is about politicians, and this was about politicians. This was about gerrymandering, drawing lines for politicians, and that's what it is. And so now we'll see what happens next. Right.
And Rob, what happened with the messaging and the no campaign? Where did Republicans go wrong?
Well, the no campaign never really materialized to the degree it had to. They needed to change the topic from Donald Trump back to, hey, these are politicians drawing their own lines. It's complete self-interest. They never had the resources to do that. Former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, had talked about bringing in a big campaign to rival that, led by the governor, and it never, ever materialized. So they ceded the field. And like I was saying earlier, really left behind these Republican members of Congress. But Republicans in California are used to being outnumbered. They're outnumbered again tonight, so they're going to lose tonight. But there's still a party that has gained in registration in this decade. There's still a party that can fight for some of these seats. I mean, a year from now, we could be sitting here, and if Kevin Kiley wins, or David Valadao wins down in the Central Valley, that's a pretty big rebuke to what was supposed to be yielded from Prop 50 passing for the Democrats. So we'll see. It doesn't have huge implications for Republicans, but it's disappointing, I'm sure, for a lot of them. They didn't get to compete on equal footing with the governor and his machine.
When we talk about implications, talk about from the national level, right? Because we look at what happened here in California with Prop 50. We look at what happened in New York and Virginia and New Jersey. It was indeed a night where Democrats kind of ran the board. I think Republicans were hopeful with New Jersey, perhaps, that they might be able to pull out the governorship there. And so, given that that was not the case, what should we read on the national level about the mood of the country when it comes to the Trump administration?
Well, I think you're going to see a lot of this is a rejection of Donald Trump, across the board. And I think that's going to be hard for the Trump administration to say, hold on a minute, people got it wrong when the results are pretty overwhelming. So, but this is what we're going to see. This is what we're going to see in a governor's race. We're going to have people running for governor. That's going to pick up steam again here in our state. And there'll be a bunch of Democrats saying, I'm going to be the ones going to fight Donald Trump. So, if you're tired of seeing Donald Trump, well, then, turn off your TV for the next year and a half, because there's going to be a lot more Donald Trump in the election ads, both here in California and nationwide.
Can the Dems ride this momentum? I think implied, it's been argued, the fact that we even had this redistricting battle was that they may not have felt so confident going into the midterms. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Where do you think that stands?
Yeah, I think there's going to be, what folks are going to look at is, did Latino voters come out and did they vote? They didn't vote for Kamala Harris last time. There were, a couple million that didn't show up that had voted for Biden. So that'll be the next thing as people start sifting through this to see where was the vote, who came out, who voted, who didn't vote. And, what does that mean going forward? There is a rejection clearly of Donald Trump, but is it a coastal rejection of Donald Trump? He ran up the score in Marin, not so much in Modesto, and that's, I think, the things we're looking at.
I have to ask you, I understand the president had a private dinner at the White House tonight. What do you think the Trump White House is saying in response to these results tonight?
Well, what they say publicly might be different than privately.
That's true.
Stand by for the Truth Social saying that this was all rigged in California and that was voter fraud. I wish I could say that tongue in cheek, but I wouldn't be surprised if the president makes that allegation, which of course would be false. I think privately they're concerned. They're like, this does not mean that the midterms a year from now will follow suit from tonight, but some things are going to have to get better for the president between now and next year, and for the Republicans. Primarily his approval rating and his approval rating on the economy and the inflation rate. And we got to watch unemployment rate now as well. So this is a real warning sign to the Trump White House of, if you stay on this course, you could be really headed for a tough midterm maybe you need to start thinking about how to move the slides in a way that start to bring that approval rating back up.
Right. And in the past, you have expressed with us concern that voices are being diminished, right? Especially Republican voices. Now that redistricting, this mid-decade gerrymandering will be taking place. Can you explain some of your thoughts behind that?
Well, I get concerned that Republicans in California, I mean, you're going to go, look, Steve Garvey got about 42% of the vote for U.S. Senate. Now under this map, the Republican representation in the House of Representatives from California is going to be around 9%. So it is grossly unfair to, frankly, millions upon millions of Californians that they don't have that type of proportional representation. And, the same is true, it's happening in Texas, but Illinois did the same thing in favor of Democrats at the beginning of the decade, as did New Mexico. Parties will always gerrymander to their own interests if they have that opportunity, which is what the commissioner was very articulate about earlier, of how it's really unfortunate that we're giving back into politician interests instead of these independent efforts that truly create competition and allow voters and citizens to have greater voice.
We are getting reaction to Prop 50 being called as a pass tonight, saying that Prop 50 has indeed passed. No one seemed to think that it would not. The thing that we're going to be watching now is by how much. What do the numbers look like? What does it look like county by county? We do have our Alex Bell, who's going to be standing by to give us a look at the maps to try to see what some of the initial results will be, but will there be any surprises, or are there any areas that you're watching closely?
Well, I think all the areas we talked about in terms of these new congressional seats, where do they fall with 50? Again, a place like Placer County, that was a place that supported the recall of Gavin Newsom by almost 60%, 58%. Where does that fall in this? Is it a similar sort of? I think there were 28 counties that voted to recall Gavin Newsom. Do those counties all fall in line on no on 50? So those are the things I think we're going to start looking at to see, like, okay, is this different, fundamentally different than that election, or is this just sort of a repeat?
Yeah, some races have been really, really close. Remember last year, Duarte and Gray. So there still is a lot of wiggle room between both parties in some of these counties.
Yeah, and I think, Adam Gray's seat has changed now. They've made it a little bit more Democratic. It's picked up some of Stockton, but it's still a seat that could be a target. So I don't think Adam Gray's out of the woods. They tried to take David Valadeo's seat and make it more Democratic, but it was pretty Democratic before, So this is what we'll have to see are the candidates they're going to find better or worse, to really make these folks work.
That's a good point.
Valadeo, Adam Gray's been in tough races before. Valadeo's won and lost. Kiley's been in tough races before. There's not a lot of Democrats who've been in really tough races like this that can say, I know how to work that muscle because I go to the gym every day for these tough races. Kiley said it, and he's been someone they've targeted often. And so we'll have to see how all this plays out.
Let's ask our Republican at the table then. The question becomes, now that it seems this has passed, we talked about how this was supposed to set up 5 additional Democratic-leaning seats, if you will. How successful do you think this map will be, though?
A lot of it will have to do with what kind of midterm it is. I mean, if it's a classic midterm and Trump's numbers aren't better, they probably win the 5 seats. They probably do. But that doesn't mean they hold them throughout the decade. And if things turn around and the midterm isn't as negative as it might be, looks like it might be a year out, look, we talked about it. Kiley can win. Valadeo can win. Gray could still get challenged by a Republican. You could still have competitive races. There's a San Diego seat, Darrell Iss's seat, that he looks like he could still be competitive in, possibly. It's a heavy lean Dem, but it's not a sure thing. So there's a little bit here a year from now. I wouldn't be shocked if we're saying, boy, this overpromised and didn't deliver for the Democrats. You still got to go out and play the game, so to speak. And we got to see who candidates are going to be. But I would say the odds are Republicans have a bad midterm next year. That's usually what happens to the party in power. And if that happens, then these districts more likely than not will perform the way Paul Mitchell and the Democrats drew them.
You got me thinking about, where does the shutdown fit in all of this? I mean, the timing of this, wow, it's a lot.
I don't think the shutdown will be a big issue a year from now when people are voting, unless there's another shutdown. Then it'll be about that shutdown. So, what the midterm will largely be litigated on has to do with a lot of months that lie ahead of what it is that Donald Trump might do.
Right. Well, the other thing we're going to see is Democrats being challenged by Democrats. And, we're already seeing that locally. We've seen it with Mike Thompson being challenged. There's races in Southern California. So there could be this, hey, look at the new guy in New York did. I could do that too here. So that's harder to predict. And, there's a lot of people who think, why not me? And I think you're going to see some of that.
Pelosi's being challenged.
Right.
Well, we have to talk about age, right? Because I was going to say Mamdani, 34, I think he is, right? And then we see Wiener there in the Bay Area challenging, the former speaker. There is a real, at least it seems within the Democratic Party, this sense that, we need some new, fresh leadership, if you will.
Right.
Building a younger bench.
Right. I'm old in the Democratic Party, and I feel like I don't feel.
You're old at both parties.
There you go. Yeah. I'm just old.
They have good camaraderie.
But it's, there is a much younger vibe coming through. When I started this, before I had gray hair, I worked in these districts that were purple, and they were many of them. There's a lot fewer of them, and people want to go. They want to run somewhere. Well, the person in front of them has been there for a long time. They're like, okay, maybe it's my turn. So I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And, we'll see. I don't know if anyone's really cracked the code of how to do this. I think, but there's plenty of people who say, well, I can try. I'll do it differently.
Do you think it's helped with the messaging that they've had younger folks, quote unquote younger folks, AOC for sure, but then former President Barack Obama, whereas on the Republican side, we had Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right? That harkens back to an old guard, 2008, but he was, really trying to, the front
Yeah,
runner
he was
of
the identifiable Republican voice. And, the reform obviously were reforms, the Independent Commission were signature political reforms of his time as governor. Republican bench in California obviously is pretty bare. The generational thing, though, is interesting because it still depends on message. Because you're seeing in the Democratic Party, and pretty much what we're seeing is young candidates on the left trying to push out incumbents. But some of the most successful Democrats in the country, some would say, are young Democrats who are more centrist. There's a congressman in Maine named Jared Golden, who's a vet. He's in his 40s. He wins a seat that Trump won by like 12 points. The two women that were elected tonight governors in New Jersey and Virginia, they're young still. They're under 50. So that's young. So it still depends what the message is, I think, as much as the generational aspect.
Yeah, you want to add to
Well, and I think that there's a lot of consternation in the Democratic Party, but I think there's a as Rob said, the message matters, and I think people are going to say we need to win races. We want to make sure we start winning things. So, I would think that people do try to look to some of these successful candidates and what their message was, and New York's a one-off, right? It was a disgraced governor who probably shouldn't have run. They probably should have got a better candidate to challenge. And, Mamdani's going to win, but it's not going to be a 65%, overwhelming. It's going to be closer. So, but people, this is how politics is always, everybody wants to be the next big thing. They, they want to be that. And it's a lot harder to be that when you're 45 and you're not good with doing vertical videos,
Good point.
Sign of the times, right?
Yeah.